Veritas SCP Files. Episode 83 Special Containment. Personal log of Special Officer Meri Parker regarding SCP-6996, colloquial name to be determined. Object Class Keter. Risk assessment level to be determined, likely extremely high. Report date is irrelevant. I have carried such a constant, crushing weight of guilt and shame in my chest these past few days that I've only now been able to bring myself to record our last journey. For a while, I truly believe that my failure, my shameful susceptibility to SCP-6996, had cost me the one thing I truly value most in the world. But today is different. There is, once again, something to look forward to. And so I am finally able to record the experience. About a month ago, we packed up and moved yet again. Another stop along our unending path into whatever it is Niall is searching for. One day he received his orders, and the next we were pulling up outside a newly constructed research outpost dedicated entirely to SCP-6996. Now, I am no stranger to incomplete briefings. Many of the Keters we've encountered require such high clearance that I am functionally blind to what's happening around me. I stay close to Niall, alert and ready to defend, even when I don't know what I'm meant to defend against. Hushed conversations happen just beyond my hearing, and the fragments of technical jargon I do catch rarely mean anything to me at all. So, when Niall told me I was not cleared to know anything about SCP-6996, I accepted it without question. Ordinarily, it wouldn't have mattered. I was used to that kind of darkness. But this time, the moment we stepped inside the facility, something felt wrong. From the outside, it was an ordinary Foundation building, disguised as a military research base. It had concrete, fencing, guard towers, convincing enough to turn away any civilian who wandered too far off the path. Inside, however, that illusion collapsed. The corridors were pure white, not the muted, practical off-white of most buildings, but a sterile, all-encompassing white, uniform and gleaming. The overhead lights reflected harshly, too bright and too blinding. And from beneath every sliding laboratory door, bleeding out into the hallways, was red. It did not strobe like most emergency lights, and there was no uniform blinking of equipment signals. It was simply a constant, unbroken red glow, spilling through the seams under the doors, and radiating outward towards us. When we passed rooms with observation windows, I could see that every chamber was saturated entirely in that harsh crimson light. Every lab was the same shade, deep, angry, and constant. Niall was pulled away from me almost immediately. This anomaly, whatever it was, carried some sort of intense importance. He was ushered into rank-restricted meetings while I was left standing in the corridor, trying to be inconspicuous and out of the way. Everyone wore heavy, eye-shielding, dark goggles with visors and thick-layered lenses. They moved quickly in a constant bustle to and from their labs. No one looked at me twice. I was brushed past, spun around, and ultimately left alone to wander the red and white halls, peering through windows into experiments I didn't understand, wondering why so few people seemed disturbed by the oppressive glare. I did notice eventually that I hadn't been issued any eye protection, but in the moments I managed to catch Niall between meetings, he wasn't wearing goggles either. No one explicitly told me I needed them. No one stopped me and asked who I was or why I was there. So I assumed it was nothing to worry about. I told myself the glass separating me from the odd red experiments was enough. The first week was merely uncomfortable. I explored as much of the facility as my clearance allowed, but there was nowhere that truly escaped the red. Every corridor bled into the next, every turn revealing the same stark white walls and the same relentless leaked glow from under the rows of sealed doors. I spent hours pacing, tugging at handles I wasn't authorized to open, hoping to stumble into some pocket of neutral white or yellow light. It never happened. The irritation crept in. Who builds a facility with no clear labels and directions? With unmarked doors and looping corridors that never seem to lead anywhere restful? More often than not, I found myself wandering outside instead. The grounds were uniform and barren, but at least the sky wasn't red. I'd pace the perimeter, breathing in clean, untainted air, and wonder where Niall was. Whether he spared me a thought at all while we were kept so deliberately apart. At the end of each day, we met in the mess. He always seemed fine, calm, entirely untouched by the harsh glare that had started to press against the inside of my skull. He spoke easily about the facility, about the work being done there, but always in vague, maddeningly general terms. "They're using their funding well," he'd say, or "the research is progressing smoothly." Nothing concrete, nothing real. Statements to soothe my growing frustration, but never anything to give an actual decent answer. I told myself this was just the way it worked. This was how it had always worked in the Foundation. But here it seemed especially off. Everyone around me seemed to know exactly what was happening. They were shielded, prepared. They knew where they were going, all while I was left to wander, unbriefed and unprotected. Eventually, I started to push back. I asked him why he was shutting me out, why he wouldn't tell me what we were really doing there. Why everyone else seemed trusted with the truth, while I alone hadn't the clearance. his answers never changed. Blah blah clearance levels. Something risk management. The dangers of knowing too much. It was all so familiar. The same recital I'd heard 1,000 times from higher-ups at the Foundation. But from Niall, it was unbearable. All I wanted was for him to speak to me. The weeks passed. I wondered, I waited, I begged for scraps of information I was never allowed to have. And he never gave me anything. The more I asked, the more he evaded. The more he evaded, the clearer it became that I wasn't here to protect him at all. He didn't need protection. Not here. With those calm, rehearsed answers, always placating, always perfectly reasoned, I began to understand my real function. I wasn't security for him anymore. I was a variable he was trying to control, to be managed, handled and pacified, left to play docilely in a corner while he pursued something larger, something actually important. I had become a complication. 3 weeks in, as he offered yet another of his daily explanations, I noticed my hands had, without warning, curled into tight fists. I didn't know when exactly it happened, at what point it had all become too much. I only knew that my shoulders were tight, my jaw was aching, clenched so tightly that I thought it might break, and my pulse drummed in my ears, urging me to do something about how unfair this all was. I looked across the table at him, my superior, my partner, the person I trusted most, and realized with sudden, sickening clarity that I wanted to hit him. For one awful moment, nothing existed except the urge to shut him up, to stop the constant stream of half-truths and careful omissions, to make him look at me and see what he was doing. That was when I knew I had already lost something important. I stood up and left the room, and then the facility, and just walked off into the night. There was no argument, no goodbye. I simply had the quiet realization that staying would turn me into someone I didn't recognize, and someone I never wanted to be. It wasn't worth it anymore. I would leave and return to security, somewhere far away from red lights and closed doors and the man who had led me down so tumultuous a path. The highs were amazing, but it was not worth whatever low I had been drawn towards in those red corridors. I told myself that if I walked away now, I might still find myself again. It took half an hour for my phone to start buzzing. Niall, of course. I ignored it at first. I told myself I needed the space, that answering would only make things worse. But the calls kept coming, one immediately after the other. And with each vibration, the knot of guilt twisted tighter in my stomach, until I swear it was going to consume my entire being. I answered. He didn't ask for an apology. He didn't offer one either. Instead, he told me the truth. SCP-6996, he explained, wasn't a series of objects or a new, hitherto unknown substance. It was an incredibly prevalent phenomenon. The color red itself, or more precisely, a specific range of wavelengths within it. For centuries it had been overlooked, considered a normal part of our color spectrum. But when recent studies of it had stripped away sociocultural factors, they had revealed that this color was a particularly insidious SCP. Exposure to it causes measurable changes: growing anger and aggression, anxiety, arrogance, a sense of looming dread and overwhelm. It snuck into people's minds, pushing just a little at a time, just enough to inch people closer to a confrontation, to action. The facility existed because SCP-6996 couldn't be contained in any impactful way. The color red is everywhere. All we could do was study it, learn about it, spread misinformation, and limit it as best we could. Every person assigned there had strict thresholds of exposure: protective eyewear, mandatory screenings, mandatory breaks in whitewashed rooms. But since I had not been part of the facility... He paused and then finally admitted it. He had simply neglected to consider that I would be exposed. He hadn't realized that I was susceptible too. That I wasn't being directly exposed, but the effects accumulated in me over time as the red bled out under the doors or leaked through the reinforced glass. He admitted quietly that he had not once stopped to think about my safety. He admitted that he had failed, that he should have told me from the beginning, that he should have protected me with information, not with silence. I wanted to ask him how he had endured it so easily. Why he could walk those halls without the protective goggles and remain unchanged, while to me, it had felt like something had crawled into my head and begun to puppet my emotions. I wanted to ask if it frightened him that I had almost struck him. Surely he had seen the way I curled my fists. I wanted to ask if he was frightened still. But I didn't. Between the shame that had solidified into a pit in my stomach, the knowledge that SCP-6996 had nearly destroyed the one good thing in my life, and the unmistakable fact that he was already breaking Foundation protocol by telling me this much, I stayed silent. That was when he told me about the transfer. A reassignment to a nearby standard storage facility, effective immediately, without him. I understood what it was instantly. It wasn't punishment, but distance. Whether out of fear or duty, it was my own special form of containment. And because I was terrified of what I might become if I stayed, and even more terrified of what I had almost done, I accepted it without argument. I didn't return to collect my things. A car was sent for me and I got in. that was that. At the new facility, I spoke to no one beyond what was strictly necessary. I explained to the chief security officer, briefly and quietly, that I was to be stationed there for a time. She nodded and told me she had already been briefed. I started work immediately, and the days fell back into their old shape, the way they had always been, 3 years before Niall, before the endless chase, before the colour red. I patrolled. I checked locks. I watched cameras. I ate. I slept. I did not talk. 3 days later, Niall appeared. He pulled up in that dark Audi while I was patrolling the perimeter and waved me over like nothing had happened. Like we had not just gone through days of guilt-ridden separation. "It's time to go," he said, just like that. He told me he left the 6996 project. That staying hadn't been worth it. Not to him. Not anymore. I must have looked stunned or confused or both, because he hesitated and offered a small, almost apologetically sheepish smile. "I missed you," he said simply. He told me he'd spent his life keeping people at arm's length, and that the few he let close were always because they were useful, as tools, resources, just means to an end. But he was tired of it. He wanted something different now. Something he chose. Something that didn't require constant movement. Something he could build. He told me there was a new site, freshly constructed and still being filled. That there was an ethics role waiting for me. For us both. It was an opportunity for something a bit quieter, a bit more controlled. That we would have some say over how the place was run, what we wanted to study, what passed through our halls. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I couldn't stay there, stay apart for a moment longer. And I climbed into the car. I should have left you there.
Vault Veritas SCP Files is a podcast inspired by the SCP Foundation. Special Containment is based on SCP-6996 by Dicedron from the SCP Wiki located at scp-wiki.com/SCP-6996. It is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 unported license. This episode featured D.R. Thompson as Niall Connors. It was written and edited by Leola Angel. We welcome comments. Please rate and review us, email us at vaultveritas@gmail.com, or join our Discord channel using the link in the episode description. Thanks for listening.